Hello viewers, welcome to our program on immigration and legal affairs. I am your immigration attorney Michael Fulwani, and once again we have with us attorney David Nachman. David, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. Always a pleasure to be
Always
with
a pleasure, and
Always
both
a
of us
pleasure.
end up with doing a pretty good program, and that's
try.
why we are getting a lot of emails from our viewers thanking us for the latest and most important information to them every week on this program.
Latest and greatest information on immigration.
Thank
That's
you.
right.
Okay, so today's program is a completely different subject, but I'm sure that this will be very, very interesting to our viewers.
Sure.
Because you know that we get viewers and clients and people from all sorts of life. So people that ask us, how about the visas for nurses, how about doctors, how about religious workers. So let's take today occupation by occupation.
Right.
And as you know, and we both know, that sometimes there are different requirements for certain occupations. There are exemptions of labor certification for certain occupations. So let's talk about each category, and we can talk about temporary visas and also the immigrant visas for that category of people. So let's talk about firstly with I would say nurses. My favorite class of nurses. They do a wonderful job, taking health care.
Yep.
And anytime I have been to a hospital once or twice in my lifetime, I see the kind of work they do day and night, serving medications, and it's very hard work.
Of course.
These nurses do an excellent job, and without nurses there will be no hospitals. Okay, so talk about our nurses. There are nurses that want to come from India here on a temporary visas, H visas, or green cards.
Every country.
Every
India,
country.
India too, but every
India,
country.
every country. So yeah, and the requirements are the same no matter from which country they
That's
are
right.
coming, except there may be some categories may have some different rules, like a TN for Canadians and all that. Okay, let's talk about nurses. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, usually the analysis starts something like this, is that as you rightfully point out, you would want to look at whether or not the individual is coming to the United States temporarily or whether they're coming permanently. So you would start with that analysis. The other thing that you want to look at with nurses and with professions in general is whether or not there's a licensing requirement. For nurses, there is in fact a licensing requirement both on the non-immigrant side as well as on the immigrant side. The way we generally start an analysis for nurses is that we look at a couple of different classifications that might be available to them. The first classification we look at are H-1C nurses. H-1C nurses were specially implemented under a very, very focused bill. There are 500 nurse cases available for H-1Cs. These are nurses serving in a medically underserved area. But because there are only 500 available, we don't get too worried about those. We see them, but they're very seldom. So those are H-1Cs. Then you have the H-1Bs. And of course, H-1B visas, again, on the non-immigrant side, you have nurses who are allowed to come to the United States as professionals, in professional and specialty occupations. So who are these nurses? These are nurse specialists in neonatal, telemetry, so they're a group, and they're actually listed in the Code of Federal Regulations. They're listed as nurses that are considered to be professional nurses. Individuals who are coming to teach nursing, those are considered professional nurses. So they qualify for H-1Bs, and in many cases they're exempt from the cap because the nursing positions that they might take are affiliated with hospitals that might be affiliated with academic institutions of higher learning.
But they may be exempt. You're talking about H-1B visas.
Correct.
Yeah, they may be exempt from the cap, but the requirements of license and the requirements of education are same for all the nurses.
That's correct. And
Now
so,
let me mention that what you were telling earlier. H-1B, at one point, I remember long time ago, nurses that were even not graduates, but they had a license to practice nursing in their home country, was good enough for a nurse when they were under the special immigrant category. There was no quotas for them. And those are the times that we used to do a lot of nurses as long as they had a license in their home country and they were eligible to come here. They used to get a visa for 1 year, and then after 1 year without the license, they must get the license in the year and then get the extension.
Right.
The whole law then changed later on.
That's right.
the new law, the present law we're talking about, I just went back with thinking of the nurses. I was thinking of a lot of nurses in the 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But presently the law says you need a bachelor's degree at least equivalent to a US bachelor's degree in order to qualify for H-1B visa for a nurse. Now, a lot of nurses do not have a bachelor's degree, but even if they have a bachelor's degree, again the job should require a bachelor's degree. So their position has been that, listen, the job of nursing does not require a bachelor's degree.
In general.
In general. So you got to call them staff nurses. Staff nurses on the floor.
Generally the R-1s.
Yeah. So and they can get a license also. They can also practice nursing without a college degree. Now, therefore, now there's now only a limited number of nurses where we can prove that the nurse has a bachelor's degree. The job, again, this problem is coming. Job requires. Now, as you said very correctly, a job of a nursing teacher doing some research, and I would say jobs I have seen director of nursing, nursing supervising working in IU, and the policy of that hospital is or the custom and practice in the industries for those nurses they definitely need a bachelor's degree. Then they can qualify for H-1 visa. Right? So it's limited, but it's possible.
Correct. That's right.
Now, let's talk about immigrant visas.
So on the licensing side, though, it's important to note for the nurses that, number one, they have to meet the state license. They have to take NICLEX. They need to take TOEFL and pass TOEFL, unless they were educated in English-speaking Canada. And finally...
UK or any other country? UK also probably.
And then also, so as long as they meet the licensing, then, visa screen. Very important that they meet visa screen. They have to apply to CGFNS in Philadelphia. They can do that online and make sure that they get their visa screen certificate.
All that information available on site, I think, is cgfns.org, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And you can always contact us. We have written articles on nurses, and we can give you all the information that is needed on licensing and other requirements for the nurses.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about the immigrant side.
Yeah, let's go on the immigrant. How does a nurse get a green card now? Now, I'm not talking only about those nurses that are physically here on H-1 visas or whatever. I'm talking about a nurse sitting in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, any country. Hospital wants to sponsor for a green card. How does that work?
Well, that is an application that's done on, a petition for a foreign national.
First of all, let me mention that. One good news is still, nurses do not need to go for PERM or a labor certification.
That's right.
They're exempt. Nurses are the couple of occupations that I remember. Physical therapists and nurses do not need a labor certification.
Because
they are exempt.
Correct. Under Schedule A, Group 1, the U.S. Department of Labor recognizes nursing as a shortage occupation. And because there is a shortage, there's no need to go out to recruit.
You see, the reason for most other occupations, you need a labor certification to prove that there is a shortage of new, whatever the jobs are. But because they are already aware of the fact that nurses and physical therapists are in already shortage. So what's the point of forcing them to advertise and try to find out? They agree, they accept that shortage issue.
That's exactly
so that's a good news, because that saves a lot of effort and time and money too to go through the advertising. So assuming now, nurses there, you want to do a green card for her, you don't have to do PERM. Just have to file the form I-140.
Right, it's a pre-certified classification.
Correct.
That's correct.
Now once again, and then you can expand further. Once again, the issue is that can a nurse come under EB-2 or has to come under EB-3? Unfortunately, there's a special immigrant program under which there are $20,000 nurses a year separate from EB-3. And the waiting time, they are current or maybe small time period. With that being eliminated, the nurses come under regular employment third preference category. So even if no labor certification is required, you file I-140, petition is approved, they have to wait 10 years, 12 years to get an immigrant visa.
That's exactly
which is terrible, because I know that a lot of lobbying is done from healthcare professions, healthcare facilities and hospitals. They have been saying we need more nurses.
Well, it flies in the face of common sense to say that you have a shortage occupation and then to make those individuals wait for 10 years. But before we go any further with this, Michael, I think this is a good time for us to take a break.
Okay.
Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more.
So let's take a short break and stay tuned. We will be back. Welcome back. Just before the break, we were talking about nurses, how they can qualify for H-1 visa or other temporary visas. And David was just discussing about how do you get nurse a green card. And we explained that there's no labor certification requirement.
Right.
You file a petition and they have to wait in line for many, many years.
Michael, the question that you raised before the break is actually one that we get tremendous number of questions about. Individuals who say, well, I have a master's degree, so I want to be EB-2 and I want to be a nurse.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, the answer is, well, sorry, it doesn't work that way. Even if you have the master's degree, it's not an EB-2 classification.
I don't know, but you can answer. In a very limited category where the nurse, the master's degree or a PhD, and she get a job for teaching in an institution.
But then the question is, are you doing the case as a teacher or are you doing the case as a nurse?
Well, basically,
because if it's a teacher, then you can do it as an
teaching nurse,
EB-2 case.
she has to. For
Well,
to
then
teach a nurse is nursing.
Then she's an instructor. And so instructors,
Sure.
you can say EB-2, master's degree is required because that's what's required of instructors.
Exactly.
So then,
That's what I
but that's different from a situation where an individual is just going to be a nurse tending to patients. Not that that's not
But she can
important.
see, the thing is, going in EB-3 category, waiting time 12 years, 14
That's the
years.
problem, yeah.
EB-3 maybe 2-3 years, 4 years.
So the point, I think, for our viewers is for them to understand that there's a creative aspect of putting these cases together and to explore all angles of the case and not to just go see an immigration practitioner who pushes you in one particular direction. The idea is to explore all of your options, see which one puts you into the best light, and then to pursue that one, and also possibly to pursue some fallback positions at the same time.
No self-praise, no self-praise. David and me both are creative directors in the field of immigration. So many situations come in and we both sit down, try to discuss, figure out how do we put that person in this category. It's not easy. So what is the kind of job? I mean, we're not creating anything fraudulent or false, but based upon the information that we collect about the employer, about the job duties, about the person, we can figure out that this person may rightly fit into that particular category.
Well, I think it's one of the benefits that we have, Michael, in our practice where we have, 5 or 6 lawyers who all come together and we all collaborate to try to figure out what are the best options for the individual. And I think that that is the new wave of being able to figure out options for our clients, is everyone collaborating as a team. And I see it in the medical profession. It's not just a doctor walks in and does an operation. A doctor is going to get their team together, they're going to collaborate, they're going to figure out what's the best way to solve the problem.
Let us move on now to physical therapists.
Okay.
Physical therapists, same question. Can they qualify for H-1 visa? Can they get a green card? Can they go under the EB-3 categories or EB-2 categories? Your turn.
Okay, well, physical therapists, of course, could qualify under the H-1B. And again, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to prove that it's a professional and specialty occupation, which generally it is. They're going to have to also prove the licensing.
Yeah.
So they're going to have the same licensing issues. State licensing, you're going to have to take a look at what state you're making the application in. And you have the same issue with CGFNS. You're going to have to get a visa screen because you're seeing patients. So it's the same thing. On the immigrant side, what you have is basically the same rules as nurses.
I don't know if the name is same visa screen or not, but physical therapists
they have to get,
go through.
yeah, they have to do the same type of thing, get the certifications. On the flip side, on the immigrant side, you have the same sort of thing, same consideration, Schedule A Group 1, so it's exempt from the labor certification
most
process.
of them, either nurses or these physical therapists, generally have a license in India or Pakistan or wherever. So they are already working in their capacity, and that helps, and probably maybe a requirement also that they must be licensed physical therapists in order to qualify for the license here, or otherwise they may have to go to some schooling here or some requirements.
Right, well that's why the equivalency, that's why they're doing the equivalency evaluation, right.
So let's go further. We're talking about EB-2, you're talking about EB-3.
Well, generally for physical therapists, it's my understanding that those are EB-2 cases. Those are considered to be EB-2s, not necessarily EB-3 cases.
But they need a master's degree.
They have to have a master's degree.
That's the thing,
right.
they need a master's.
But if they have the master's degree, right, and that's what it is, it's considered to be a master's degree area.
Exactly.
So those are the non-immigrant and immigrant sides of the nurses and the physical therapists, right?
And I was also thinking about non-professionals. I mean, right now we've been talking about people, nurses, physical therapists, and all that.
Or what sort of non-professionals?
Well,
like,
again, I look at two separate categories. One
medical
category of people is very
technologists.
hard to even do a labor certification. Other categories we can do a labor cert and they go under EB-3 and may not have a H-1, or maybe in rare cases they can have H-1. For example, we can talk about taxi drivers, low skill construction
Right.
workers. I don't see any kind of category that a non-immigrant other than, I don't think even EB-3. Taxi drivers are not in shortage.
Other worker classifications, and then it's a tough question as to whether or not the employer is going to sponsor.
And
then
they
how
do
do
the
you
labor
prove
certificate.
how do you prove that there are
Labor
no U.S.
certification,
workers?
PERM, that there are no taxi drivers available. It's hard.
Very
It's
tough to
same
prove.
thing about a low level construction
Correct.
worker. They're only putting nail in the 4x4 as against the more creative, more knowledgeable.
Although if you talk to employers in certain areas, they will say to you that we've advertised, we've put up signs, we put newspaper ads, and we still can't find U.S. workers to take the job.
Then you could go through the process of
In
labor
which
certification.
case, go through the process,
Exactly.
prove there are no U.S. workers, and then of course the labor certification application is
I
available.
mean, I had cases where like bricklayers. In construction work also, their type of work that you can have a shortage.
Yeah.
Bricklayers.
We've had cases approved for bricklayers.
I know,
Yeah, of
same.
course.
And also
Many of the artisans.
artisans.
Yeah, many of the artisans.
As a carpenter. Now again, carpenter, what kind of carpenter? Who just putting nails in the 2x2s, or a carpenter for furniture, for example.
That's right.
Then that's easier because it's skills. That the skill is needed, experience is needed, knowledge is needed.
Right.
There's a shortage. I mean, you put an ad in a paper for just carpenters, and you
Well,
put.
yeah, you're going to get a lot of you get applications, you get people who are interested, and of course
But you
there'll always be
specify you want.
exactly, and that's the
Furniture.
that's a creative aspect of putting a labor certification application together, because the labor certification application is a fusion of what the individual does, what the Department of Labor is looking for, and then making that all work with inclusion of what the individual's background is and their qualifications, and drawing that into that job description. So for example, like you said, Michael, having a job description, which is a general job description for an artisan, maybe you're going to get a ton of resumes. However, if you have an individual, and we had this once, where we had an individual who did mosaics. So we were kind of tossed between whether or not we should do it as a P3
Exactly.
type of case, because it was culturally unique. The individual was from Turkey and they did mosaics. So we were trying to figure out whether that's culturally unique, and then possibly doing some kind of a national interest waiver or a Schedule A Group 1 case for them, or to go the route of a labor certification application.
David, I tell you, I did a case for that iron gate that is made. Iron gate for the house, for example. Lot
Right.
of places in
Well, that's a
Bangalore.
perfect example of.
No, if they say that iron gate, put iron and straight forward, it's not a skilled worker that way.
Right.
But you're talking of architectural work. Have you seen?
Right.
And I did that case, and we advertised. Nobody was there, and some of them want a particular culturally architectural work, like they wanted the Indian way of gate they make.
Well, it's very interesting that you say that, because we had a case also very similar to that one, where the individual who was making the wrought iron actually smelted it and did all of the they call it blacksmith work themselves. So they were actually hammering that stuff on the I don't know what you call that big rock, and so it all had to be handmade.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't know how to hand make it, then you weren't able to apply for the job.
Exactly.
So that's
each case, the bottom line is each case has to be analyzed and taken into consideration, the skills, the job requirements, and everything.
The facts drive the case.
Facts drive.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
Michael, I think this is a good time for us to break, and then we'll come back and talk about the
Okay,
other occupations.
very good. So let's take a short break, and we'll be back right after the break. Welcome back. Just before the break, we touched the religious workers issue, and we have been talking about the visas, non-immigrant and immigrant for different occupations. Let's move on to the R-1 religious workers. Now let me tell you a little bit background Going back many years back, not too many, not too long ago, maybe few more years back,
2 years maybe.
2-3 years
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
the process was like this. A temple or a religious mosque or a church in United States wants to bring a priest from any country, including India. Then the institution in the United States, a non-profit organization, will issue a letter that we want to bring this priest, and he must have knowledge or experience working as a priest for at least more than 2 years in a foreign country. So what we used to do, we'll get a letter from the sponsoring institution, a letter from the institution in India, for example. We did some Sikh priest, and from the Gurdwara, in Amritsar, they issued the letter that they were actually priests working for so many years. Same thing about the churches in South India, same thing about the Hindu temples and Jain temples around the country. It was very simple procedure. Put together all the documents and proof, and then go to the American consul directly with the passport. They apply, the consul interviewed them, and they issued the visa R1. So it was simple process.
Right.
What happened there? Very heavy duty fraud, believe me. The fraud was like this, as we might have said in one of our earlier programs. There was a small church with maybe capacity of maybe $400-500 maximum, or 400 people coming for a worship. They filed the applications for more than 400 people, and they were actually, they didn't need anybody. It was a very small church. They had only one priest anyway, very few people coming on a Sunday. But their purpose was not actually running and operating a church. Purpose was to make money by fraud. So what they did, used to take 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 from a person, just give them a letter that we are sponsoring him, we need him for a priest. 400, when this thing came to the surface, when the government started investigating, when they found this fraud was happening, nobody would believe. 400 priests you want for this little church. So when they went in and inspected, they ran away, and that was closed, and all these people were denied the visas.
Right.
On a Shilpi side, we went through this struggle few times. This was a giant temple here in the United States who wanted to bring Shilpis to make those architectural drawings. And at that time, prior to petition, I'm saying, before the petition time, they went to the consulate. The American consulate said, come on, they are construction workers. What do you mean by religious workers? What's religion come into construction? They said no. They kind of denied. We went to the State Department, and we gave them a whole bunch of religious books with those pages and items and the articles in the book Vedas as to how these temples had to be made, what knowledge these should have. Shilpis must know the religion. They would have to do certain, follow the religion in direction in terms of whatever in their statue, their God's statue. They have to do perfectly. There can't be just any mistakes.
Right.
And the Department of State agreed with us.
Right.
They sent an advisory opinion to council. We agree that this is an R1 because these people have to have a knowledge of religion and how it should be done.
Right.
And then I was actually visiting American consulate at that time, and as soon as I walked out, I got a message that call came from Chennai that they are going to send them back.
That's great.
So this is the history I'm saying, how they moved from those times to these times now. But you will agree with me that this change was important, and this change probably will cut down the fraud, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that one of the other points that you're making for our viewers, which I think is great, is that they should understand that there's not just one way to look at a case. So the same way you had the Shilpis, we had an inquiry from a Japanese organization that was putting up a Japanese temple here in the United States that was ultimately going to be used as a restaurant. Okay. So the three ways in which we could bring workers were the H-2B, which was the temporary non-immigrant workers, non-agricultural workers. The other way we looked at it was the R-1, because they were putting together a temple. So it was a Buddhist temple that they were lashing. They were lashing. So we also believe that there was a religious aspect because they were hired specifically to know the number of lashes that needed to be made to put the temple together. Yes. And that is also something that is culturally unique. So the P3 visa was another opportunity that we looked at. So we could have joined all of them together on the P3. So there are three options for one particular way to solve a visa
how
problem.
did it end then?
So, well, we ultimately did the R visas.
R visas.
So the R visas worked for us. So it just depends. But
By the
what's
way,
good
when
is
we were working on this, I was very much worried they needed. I already started kind of kept ready H-2Bs. I thought if this doesn't work, then we'll do the H-2Bs. But
H-2B,
thank God.
right.
But then we had to
Exactly.
go through the whole process of labor cert, prevailing wage, and all the issues. So.
Right, and the other problem now that we have with the H-2Bs, unfortunately, is that they cap out.
Yes.
Because we have now two separate caps each year. There are a certain number of H-2B visas that are available for the first half of the year.
I think how much
and then for
time
the
we have
second
left?
half.
2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about H-2Bs generally? Talk about H-2Bs. What are H-2Bs?
Okay, so H-2B non-immigrant visas are for individuals who are coming to the United States for peak load seasonal needs. The employer has to get what's called a temporary labor certification. It's done on the old ETA 750 Part A and B forms. They're submitted to the Department of Labor. The U.S. Department of Labor, national organizations which are in Chicago and Atlanta, they process these things on a fairly rapid basis. Basically, the employer has to prove that there are no U.S. workers who can take the job and that it's temporary, peak load, or seasonal needs. So who are these people? These people could be electricians that are coming to the United States to possibly do some type of an electrical work for maybe maybe what they're doing is lighting for a stadium for a cricket match. Maybe it's a group of people who are coming to the United States to engage temporarily. I know that they're used for soccer coaches who are coming during certain seasons to teach kids in the United States how to play soccer.
Bottom line,
and
it
then
has to be
go
a
home.
temporary job.
Has to be
That's
temporary.
the most important.
That's correct.
And
It's
you
a
need a labor
temporary-
certification.
It's a temporary labor certification for sporadic, peak load, or seasonal need. That's exactly what
But the
it
same
is.
thing I was talking about, some restaurants try to bring chefs regular to work.
It's difficult because you have to
no,
prove
the
the
Department of
peak load
Labor
need.
said,
Yeah.
permanent job. They're not coming for a month
That's
or
right.
so.
That's
So
right.
they will not give a labor certification.
However, the way you could prove it is by using a graph to show that in certain parts of the year, that restaurant has a need, because let's say, for example, I know that
Well,
there
you
are
are talking
Gujarati.
again, going to
Well,
seasonal.
they're
Seasonal.
yeah, they're seasonal.
Seasonal.
There's, for example, I know that there are big conclaves out in Pennsylvania for the Gujarati people during the summer. So there's a tremendous need for hereditary chefs who are going to cook
Well,
for
like
all
there's
these
a
people.
convention, what, 1 week or 2 weeks
Exactly.
convention.
So you
They
need
just
people
want
to
bring
cook
them.
for all the people. So yeah.
Okay, any last word you want to give to viewers?
Yeah, I think you have to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for being here
It's
with
my
us.
pleasure, Michael,
And,
always.
always watch us every Saturday at 1 p.m. only on TV Asia. Thank you very much.
जिसने खोजी वो धन लेके लौटा, हंसी जिसने खोजी चमन लेके लौटा, मगर प्यार को खोजने जो चला वो न तन लेके लौटा न मन लेके लौटा। सुबह नाई शाम नाई, सुबह नाई शाम नाई, जिस दिन तेरी याद नाई, याद नाई, सुबह नाई शाम नाई।